In the chilling vacuum of space, far from the whispers of the Force, lay the metallic husk of a man. Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, was a monument to power, fear, and shattered dreams. His heavy, mechanical breathing echoed through the sterile corridors of his personal meditation chamber, a sound that had become synonymous with tyranny across the galaxy. Yet, within that obsidian shell, a deeper, more profound truth festered. Vader was a shadow of the man he once was, a pale imitation of the boundless potential that had been Anakin Skywalker. Anakin, the name itself, felt like a phantom limb, a searing memory of sun-drenched Tatooine, of speeders racing across dunes, of the thrilling hum of a lightsaber wielded with effortless grace. He remembered, vaguely, the almost joyous abandon with which he had danced through duels, deflecting blaster fire with an arrogant flick of his wrist, or dismantling droids with a series of precise, devastating strikes. The Force then was a river, flowing through him, around him, a part of his very being. It amplified his every instinct, made him quicker, stronger, more perceptive than any Jedi of his generation. He was the chosen one, burdened by prophecy, yes, but undeniably blessed with a connection to the cosmic energy that bordered on miraculous. Then came the fire, the betrayal, the agonizing birth of Vader. Each breath within his life support suit was a cruel reminder of that transformation. The suit, designed to keep him alive, was also his prison, a constant anchor dragging him back to the fiery shores of Mustafar. It limited his movements, forcing a rigid, almost robotic fighting style. Gone were the fluid, unpredictable acrobatics that had once made him a blur on the battlefield. His mechanical limbs, while strong, lacked the subtle, intuitive connection to the Force that natural flesh possessed. He could no longer channel lightning through his hands, the cybernetics disrupting the raw flow of energy. His connection to the Force, once a mighty torrent, was now a fractured stream, redirected, dampened, and often polluted by pain. But the physical limitations were merely symptoms of a deeper ailment, the internal devastation. Anakin Skywalker had been driven by a desire to protect, a longing for connection, even if those desires were tainted by fear of loss. He had loved Padme, loved Obi-Wan, loved the ideals of the Jedi. However conflicted he became, these attachments, while forbidden, had been sources of immense power, fueling his Force abilities and his relentless pursuit of victory. Darth Vader loved nothing. He had systematically purged all affection, all hope, all light from his being. His every action was born of rage, of suffering, of a nihilistic devotion to the Emperor and the dark side. This made him formidable. Yes, a blunt instrument of destruction, capable of terrible feats of power. He could crush throats with a thought, shatter objects with a gesture, dominate minds with his will. But this power was reactive, born of pain, a crude force compared to Anakin's vibrant, proactive mastery. Anakin, even when reckless, had retained an innate joy in the Force, a curiosity, a willingness to explore its depths. He could push boundaries, improvise, and connect with the living Force in ways Vader no longer could. Vader's connection was to the dark side of the Force, which fed on negative emotions. It gave him explosive bursts of power, but it was a corrosive energy, eating away at his soul, blinding him to the nuances and subtler currents of the Force that Anakin had once effortlessly navigated. He was a vessel for hate, not a conduit for the Force's full potential. His spirit was broken. The guilt of his actions, the profound sorrow of Padme's death, which he believed he had caused, and the constant pain of his injuries had calcified his heart. He lived in a perpetual state of suppressed agony and regret, a psychic weight that continuously drained his true potential. The dark side demanded constant feeding of these negative emotions, trapping him in a vicious cycle. Anakin had been a being of light and shadow, balanced precariously, but capable of immense good. Vader was only shadow, and that singular focus, while making him a terror, paradoxically made him less adaptable, less intuitive, less complete. He often thought of duels, not with pride, but with a detached analysis of his own weaknesses. When he fought Obi-Wan on the Death Star, there was a hesitation, a ghost of their past camaraderie, a moment of doubt that Anakin would never have allowed to fester. When he dueled Luke Skywalker, especially on Bespin, there were flickers of that old raw power, moments where the dark side surged, but always, something held him back. Was it the faint echo of fatherhood? Or was it simply the fundamental impairment of his existence? The truth that his potential had been irrevocably stunted the moment he embraced his new, terrible identity. In the end, Darth Vader was a cage, a magnificent, terrifying cage, forged in fire and hate, designed to contain the last vestiges of Anakin Skywalker. But in containing him, it also diminished him, limiting his reach, dulling his senses, and severing him from the true, boundless power of the Force that had once made him the greatest hope the galaxy had ever known. His strength was his weakness, for it was built upon a foundation of self-destruction. Anakin Skywalker moved like a storm, unpredictable and fierce, yet with an underlying grace that bordered on poetry. His lightsaber, an extension of his will, carved arcs of pure energy through the air, deflecting blaster bolts with a casual flick of the wrist, a blur of motion too fast for the eye to follow. He could leap impossible distances, spinning mid-air to deliver a devastating blow, his body a symphony of force-infused power and natural athleticism. Every muscle, every joint, every nerve ending hummed with the living force, allowing him an agility and responsiveness that few, if any, Jedi could match. He was boundless, free, a force of nature. Then came the inferno of Mustafar, stripping away flesh, searing bone, and ultimately forging a new, terrifying existence. Darth Vader, encased in his life support suit, was the antithesis of Anakin's former freedom. The black armor, designed to sustain him, became his inescapable cage. Each movement was deliberate, heavy, burdened by the weight of the cybernetic limbs. The powerful hydraulic servos granted immense strength, yes, but they robbed him of the subtle nuances, the effortless flexibility that natural muscle and bone provided. Imagine the simple act of a lunge. Anakin would explode forward, a blur of motion, his body twisting and contorting to avoid a counterattack while delivering his own. Vader, however, moved with a terrifying, unyielding power, but his lunges were stiff, linear, his massive boots thudding against the deck plates. His once acrobatic lightsaber forms were replaced by brutal, crushing blows, relying on sheer force and the DarkSide's raw power rather than nimble evasion or cunning feints. He could no longer execute the intricate spins or gravity-defying leaps that once defined his prowess. The clank of metal against metal with every step, the constant rasping hiss of his respirator. These were perpetual reminders of his imprisonment. He was cut off from the direct feel of the air, the subtle vibrations of the ground, the immediate sensory input that had once flowed freely to his unburdened self. This physical disconnect was more than just an inconvenience. It was a constant, gnawing frustration, a vivid, tangible manifestation of everything he had lost. It was a daily, hourly torment. The suit, a metallic echo of his own broken spirit, forever limiting the extraordinary potential that had once resided within Anakin Skywalker. In the scorching desert suns of Tatooine, even as a boy, Anakin Skywalker could feel the Force hum. It wasn't just a sense, but a living presence, a boundless ocean of energy that responded to his every whim. As he grew, this connection deepened, becoming an innate conduit. When Anakin reached out, the Force answered instantly, a seamless extension of his will. He could mend a broken droid with a thought, sense distant tremors in the Force, or, in moments of extreme emotion, even channel raw energy, though the Jedi cautioned against it. There was a raw, almost untamed potency to his connection, a natural flow that made his Force abilities effortless and incredibly powerful. He was, in essence, a living, breathing amplifier for the cosmic energy. But Mustafar changed everything. The searing heat, the betrayal, the agonizing reconstruction transformed the living conduit into a broken, fragmented one. Darth Vader's new form, while imposing, was a physical barrier between him and the Force. His organic limbs, once vibrant channels, were replaced by cold, unfeeling cybernetics. The sophisticated machinery that kept him alive also acted as static, a constant hum disrupting the once clear frequency of his Force connection. Imagine trying to play a delicate instrument with thick metal gloves. That was Vader's reality. The subtle, intuitive grasp of the Force that Anakin possessed was gone. He could still manipulate objects, still choke a distant officer with a mere gesture, for the dark side, in its blunt way, granted him immense power born of pain and rage. But it was crude, forced, lacking the elegant precision and effortless flow of his former self. The most glaring manifestation of this dampened connection was his inability to truly channel Force lightning. Where Palpatine could unleash torrents of crackling energy, Vader, despite his immense dark side power, could not. His cybernetics simply couldn't handle or transmit such raw, volatile power. It was a constant, infuriating reminder of his physical imprisonment and the true potential he'd squandered. Every Force push felt heavier. Every Force pull required more conscious effort. Every flicker of intuition was dimmed by the metallic shell he inhabited. He was a powerhouse, yes, but a compromised one, forever straining against the invisible shackles of his own damaged form. The raw, beautiful symphony of the Force that Anakin had once commanded was reduced to a discordant, strained echo within the confines of the Sith Lord. Anakin Skywalker's mind, for all its impulsiveness, was vibrant, quick, and capable of profound emotional connection. He felt joy, anger, love, and fear with an intensity that few could match. These emotions, though often a source of conflict for a Jedi, also fueled his incredible drive and his connection to the Force. He possessed a youthful optimism, a belief in his own destiny, and while prone to arrogance, there was a core of hopeful light within him that allowed him to heal and move forward. Then came the fall, a catastrophic psychological implosion. The moment Anakin chose the dark side, the betrayal of Obi-Wan, and the agonizing belief that he had personally killed Padme Amidalathi's events weren't just external tragedies. They were internal mutilations. Darth Vader carried these wounds not just on his body, but deep within his psyche, a festering, unhealing core of guilt, despair, and self-loathing. Every breath from his respirator was a constant reminder of Mustafar's fire. Every creak of his cybernetic joints echoed the snapping of his own bones. His very existence was a walking monument to his failures, a daily torment. He was trapped not only in his suit, but in a mental prison of his own making, a perpetual replaying loop of what he had done and what he had lost. This psychological burden was an immense, unseen weight, constantly dragging him down, diverting mental and emotional energy that Anakin once freely applied to mastering the Force or winning battles. He was never truly present, never truly at peace. While he projected an image of cold, unfeeling power, his mind was a battleground. How could he fully unleash his Force potential when a significant portion of his being was consumed by suppressed agony and regret? The dark side offered power, yes, but at the cost of internal peace, demanding that he constantly relive his darkest moments to feed its hunger. This internal strife acted as a constant drain, chipping away at the boundless wellspring of the Force that had once been Anakin Skywalker, leaving Darth Vader formidable, but forever scarred, forever less than he could have been. Anakin Skywalker, for all his flaws and his struggles with the Jedi Code, was a being of profound emotion. His love for Padme, his bond with Obi-Wan, even his protectiveness over Ahsoka, these were not just attachments, they were wellsprings. The Jedi taught that attachment led to the dark side, and in his case, it tragically did. But paradoxically, these deep emotional connections also amplified his Force abilities. When he fought to protect someone he loved, the Force surged through him, making him faster, stronger, more acutely aware. It was a broad, vibrant spectrum of power, allowing him to tap into both light and shadow, giving his mastery an unpredictable, sometimes overwhelming depth. He could inspire, he could heal, he could feel the vibrant pulse of life around him. Then came the fall, and with it, a deliberate, agonizing purging. Darth Vader, the nascent Sith Lord, understood that to fully embrace the dark side, he had to sever every last thread of his former life, every flicker of love, hope, compassion, or joy. He systematically murdered his past self, along with the younglings and the separatist leaders, carving out the very heart of what made Anakin powerful in a holistic sense. He believed this brutal surgery made him stronger, immune to weakness. But it was a terrible lie. By rejecting all positive emotions, Vader narrowed his access to the Force to a single corrosive channel: hate, fear, anger, suffering. This made him terrifyingly effective as a weapon. He could crush throats with a thought, unleash telekinetic barrages, and dominate weaker minds with ease. This reactive, destructive power was undeniably formidable. Yet, it was a crude instrument compared to Anakin's multifaceted connection. Anakin could intuitively grasp the complexities of the living Force, sensing life, feeling hope, even inspiring courage in others through his presence. Vader, living in a constant state of internal torment and external destruction, was deaf to these subtler currents. He could not inspire, only intimidate. He could not truly heal, only harm. His power was immense, yes, but it was a singular, blunt force, devoid of the vibrant versatility that Anakin's complex emotional landscape had once afforded him. He traded boundless potential for a singular, destructive rage, making him a terrifying tyrant, but ultimately a weaker conduit for the Force's true, expansive power. Anakin Skywalker, for all his flaws and his struggles with the Jedi Code, was a being of profound emotion. He loved Padme with a desperate, all-consuming passion. His bond with Obi-Wan Kenobi was that of a brother, a complicated mix of admiration and rivalry. Even his protectiveness over Ahsoka Tano, his former Padawan, was a fierce, unwavering devotion. These were not just attachments, they were wellsprings, deep reservoirs of feeling that, paradoxically, amplified his Force abilities. The Jedi taught that attachment led to the dark side, and in his case, it tragically did. But the power they brought was undeniable. When Anakin fought to protect someone he loved, the Force surged through him like a raging river, making him faster, stronger, more acutely aware than he had any right to be. It was a broad, vibrant spectrum of power, allowing him to tap into both light and shadow, giving his mastery an unpredictable, sometimes overwhelming depth. He could inspire unwavering loyalty, he could heal grievous wounds with a touch, and he could feel the vibrant pulse of life around him, a symphony of emotions and energies. Then came the fall, and with it, a deliberate, agonizing purging of his former self. Darth Vader, the nascent Sith Lord, understood that to fully embrace the dark side, he had to sever every last thread of his former life. Every flicker of love, hope, compassion, or joy had to be extinguished. He systematically murdered his past self, along with the innocent younglings and the separatist leaders, carving out the very heart of what made Anakin powerful in a holistic sense. He believed this brutal surgery made him stronger, immune to weakness. But it was a terrible, self-deceiving lie. By rejecting all positive emotions, Vader narrowed his access to the Force to a single, corrosive channel: hate, fear, anger, and suffering. This made him terrifyingly effective as a weapon. He could crush throats with a thought, unleash telekinetic barrages that shattered reinforced durasteel, and dominate weaker minds with chilling ease. This reactive, destructive power was undeniably formidable. Yet it was a crude, blunt instrument compared to Anakin's multifaceted connection. Anakin could intuitively grasp the complexities of the living Force, sensing distant life forms, feeling the subtle currents of hope, even inspiring courage in others through his very presence. Vader, living in a constant state of internal torment and external destruction, was deaf to these subtler currents. He could not inspire, only intimidate. He could not truly heal, only harm. His power was immense, yes, but it was a singular destructive force, devoid of the vibrant versatility that Anakin's complex emotional landscape had once afforded him. He traded boundless potential for a singular destructive rage, making him a terrifying tyrant. But ultimately, a weaker conduit for the Force's true, expansive power. Anakin Skywalker, for all his swagger and impulsiveness, possessed an undeniable vibrancy of spirit. He was quick to anger, yes, but also quick to forgive, driven by a boundless ambition and a deep-seated desire to make things right. Even when he made mistakes, he had the resilience to pick himself up, believing in his inherent ability to overcome obstacles. His spirit, though sometimes turbulent, was ultimately expansive, capable of soaring, of connecting with the Force in a way that felt liberating and limitless. He could tap into a joy for life, for flying, for wielding his lightsaber, that fueled his prodigious abilities. Then came the horrifying revelation on Mustafar. "You killed her. Because of you." Palpatine's words, a twisted dagger, plunged into Anakin's already wounded soul, convincing him that he, through his lust for power, had directly caused the death of the woman he loved more than life itself, Padme Amidala. This was the final, crushing blow. It wasn't just physical mutilation on the lava banks. It was the obliteration of his spirit. The profound, suffocating guilt over this perceived act, combined with the betrayal of Obi-Wan and the wholesale slaughter he had committed, left him utterly, irrevocably broken. Darth Vader lived inside that brokenness. Every mechanical breath, every thrum of his life support system was a chilling reminder of his fall, a constant echo of the screams of the Jedi younglings and the silent, accusing face of Padme. This wasn't merely a bad memory. It was a constant psychic weight, a leaden cloak of sorrow and regret that he wore beneath his black armor. It drained him, silently, perpetually. Imagine trying to wield a powerful weapon while carrying an unseen, crushing burden on your back. This was Vader's reality. The very essence of Anakin's connection to the Force was its freedom, its effortless flow. For Vader, that flow was constantly interrupted, diverted, and polluted by the festering wound of his guilt. He was a being in a perpetual state of suppressed agony, an internal battle that raged ceaselessly. This self-inflicted torment consumed vast reserves of his mental and spiritual energy that Anakin would have channeled into mastering new Force techniques or improvising brilliantly in battle. Vader could still unleash terrible power, born of his rage, but it was a confined, reactive force, lacking the spontaneous, unburdened expansiveness that had made Anakin Skywalker truly limitless. He was powerful, yes, but eternally tethered to the very chains he had forged for himself. Anakin Skywalker, even as a Padawan, was a whirlwind of innovation on the battlefield. He didn't just master the traditional Jedi forms. He bent them, twisted them, infused them with his own daring impulsiveness. His lightsaber duels were less about rigid adherence to technique and more about intuitive, often breathtaking, improvisation. He would exploit an opponent's momentary hesitation, invent a new move on the fly, or combine Force pushes with lightsaber strikes in a way that surprised even his own masters. He was a natural strategist, capable of adapting to rapidly changing circumstances, whether it was a chaotic dogfight in space or a ground skirmish against overwhelming odds. His mind was agile, always seeking the unexpected solution, the unconventional path to victory. Then came the dark side and the terrible transformation. Darth Vader, while undeniably powerful, was a prisoner of his own making. The vast majority of his physical body was replaced by cybernetics, forcing a rigid, almost robotic fighting style. Gone were the fluid, unpredictable acrobatics that once made Anakin a blur on the battlefield. Vader's movements were precise, heavy, and crushing, but ultimately, they were predictable. He relied on brute strength, the sheer weight of his blows, and the psychological impact of his terrifying presence. Imagine a chess player. Anakin was the grandmaster who could anticipate multiple moves ahead, sacrifice a pawn to win the queen, and devise entirely new strategies mid-game. Vader was the player who had perfected a single, overwhelming opening, relying on its sheer force to overwhelm opponents. If that opening failed, or if an opponent found a way around it, Vader found himself at a disadvantage, lacking the spontaneous adaptability that had defined his former self. His single-minded devotion to the dark side also contributed to this rigidity. The dark side thrives on anger and suffering, encouraging a direct, often unsubtle application of power. This focus, while making him a terror, paradoxically made him less intuitive, less open to the subtle currents and unexpected turns of the Force that might offer an alternative solution. He would relentlessly pursue a goal, crushing all obstacles, rather than creatively maneuvering around them. Anakin's mind had been a forge of new ideas. Vader's was a blunt instrument, powerful, yes, but fundamentally limited in its approach, a stark contrast to the brilliant improvisational genius he once was. Anakin Skywalker, for all his impetuousness, was rarely plagued by true doubt in battle. Once he committed to a course of action, his focus was absolute, his will unshakable. He moved with a relentless certainty, whether against a squadron of droids or a formidable Sith Lord. His confidence, bordering on arrogance, was a strength, allowing him to push boundaries and achieve feats that seemed impossible to others. When he wielded his lightsaber, there was no hesitation, only the pure, decisive intent to win. Then came the dark cloak of Darth Vader, and with it, a constant, insidious internal war. Even cloaked in the terrifying armor, the echoes of Anakin Skywalker refused to be entirely silenced. These were not just memories. They were ghosts that haunted his every move, particularly in moments of profound conflict. Consider his fateful duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi aboard the Death Star. As their lightsabers clashed, a part of Vader, deep within the charred remains of his soul, remembered. He remembered the brother he had loved, the master who had guided him, the bond they had shared. He heard Obi-Wan's calm, almost sorrowful voice. "If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." There was a flicker, a hesitation in Vader's attack, a tiny crack in his dark resolve, born not of weakness in skill, but of the immense, suppressed grief and betrayal that still festered. Anakin would have struck with ruthless efficiency. Vader, for a fleeting instant, was burdened by the weight of their shared past. Years later, on Bespin, when he faced Luke Skywalker, the conflict became even more profound. He sought to crush the rebellion. Yes, but more importantly, he sought to turn his son to the dark side. As he pressed Luke, forcing him back, there were moments when his blows weren't purely annihilating. Was it a father's instinct holding him back from delivering a fatal blow? Was it the faint, almost imperceptible stirrings of a forgotten love? Or simply the shock of encountering the living embodiment of his lost life with Padme? These internal struggles, however brief, created micro-hesitations, subtle shifts in his Force focus, and moments where the sheer, unadulterated power of a fully unleashed Anakin would have overwhelmed his opponent without question. Darth Vader, the terrifying weapon, was constantly fighting not just his enemies, but the lingering shadow of the man he once was. Anakin Skywalker was not merely strong in the Force. He was a living testament to its infinite possibilities. Whispers among the Jedi Council hailed him as the Chosen One, burdened by an ancient prophecy but blessed with a connection to the cosmic energy that transcended anything seen in generations. His potential was not just immense, it was truly boundless, an ever-expanding wellspring of raw power that astonished even the most stoic Jedi masters. He absorbed knowledge and techniques at an accelerated pace, his intuition and raw ability allowing him to grasp complex Force manipulations with an effortless grace. He was a supernova waiting to explode, capable of achieving anything, from moving mountains with a gesture to subtly influencing the very fabric of reality, if only he continued down the path of light. His destiny, had he remained true to the Jedi ideals, was one of unimaginable growth, a true Force nexus for the galaxy. Then came the fall, a catastrophic choice that twisted that boundless potential into something finite, albeit terrifyingly powerful. The moment Anakin Skywalker embraced the dark side, sacrificing everything for perceived power and fear of loss, he sealed himself into a gilded cage of his own making. The vast, limitless ocean of his Force potential was violently condensed, distorted, and ultimately contained within the brutal confines of his new, tormented existence as Darth Vader. He became a formidable weapon, yes, the Emperor's enforcer, a chilling symbol of galactic oppression. His power to crush throats across star systems, deflect a volley of blaster fire with casual ease, and dominate weaker minds with chilling telepathy was undeniable. He could rip starships from the sky and command entire legions with a single guttural command. But this power, while immense, was largely reactive, a blunt, destructive force fueled by ceaseless pain and anger, serving a singular, brutal purpose. It was the power of a colossal sledgehammer, effective in its raw might, but tragically lacking the precision, versatility, and subtle nuance that Anakin's unfettered potential had promised. Vader was no longer on a journey of discovery with the Force. He was trapped in a repetitive cycle of applying destructive power, never truly evolving. He no longer sought to understand the Force's deeper mysteries or explore its more benevolent applications. His focus was narrow, almost entirely consumed by control, destruction, and unquestioning obedience to his Dark Master. He was a conduit for the DarkSide's corrosive rage, but the infinite possibilities that once lay before Anakin Skywalker were now tragically closed off. The universe of the Force, which had been his to explore and expand, became a constricted, painful channel. He was powerful, perhaps more so than almost any other Force user in the galaxy, save for the Emperor. But he was a fixed entity, no longer growing, no longer evolving, irrevocably stunted from the limitless being he was truly meant to be. Anakin Skywalker, for all his youthful arrogance and impatience, was driven by a fundamental desire to protect. He yearned for stability, for love, for a world where those he cared about would be safe from suffering. Even his turn to the dark side tragically stemmed from this very impulse, a desperate, misguided attempt to gain the power to save Padme from death. While flawed, his foundation was built on a yearning for connection, for belonging, for a future, however twisted his methods became. He sought to build, even if it was a tyrannical empire. Then came the inferno of Mustafar, both literal and metaphorical. The moment Anakin Skywalker chose to shed his identity and become Darth Vader, he embarked on a path of profound self-destruction. He didn't just kill the Jedi, he systematically murdered every part of himself that yearned for light, for love, for peace. His commitment to the dark side demanded total emotional isolation. He believed strength lay in severance, in cutting off all ties, all compassion, all vulnerabilities. His power, therefore, was built on a foundation of negation, the destruction of his past, his relationships, and ultimately, his own soul. This was the great irony of Vader's power. He was terrifyingly strong, yes, capable of immense feats of force manipulation and combat. He could snap necks with a thought and crush rebellions with ruthless efficiency. But this strength was like a towering structure built on crumbling foundations. Each act of cruelty, each flicker of rage, each step further into the abyss, chipped away at the vast, natural wellspring of the force that had once been Anakin. His emotional isolation, which he believed made him impregnable, actually severed him from the subtle, life-affirming currents of the Force that Anakin could tap into effortlessly. He was a being of pure, concentrated hate, a blunt instrument of the Emperor's will. But that very singular focus, that self-imposed emotional desert, meant he lacked the versatility, the intuitive depth, and the innate adaptability that Anakin possessed. Anakin could draw strength from his love, from his hope, from even his fear. Vader could only draw from anger and pain, constantly having to feed that internal fire to maintain his power. This made him powerful, yes, but fundamentally brittle, perpetually teetering on the edge of his own internal collapse, a magnificent but tragic monument to self-destruction. He was a force to be reckoned with, but a fractured one, inherently weaker and less complete than the man he had once been.